No, the thumbnail was not clickbait. This building was actually said to have been built in 3 months in 1879 after a fire, which coincidentally or not, on April 23rd, the day of this publishing, caused the previous building to burn down. Thank you to this commenter for tipping me in this direction for my last video I had never even considered, and I am grateful for the comments and interactions that we are having. Also, thank you to this commenter who tipped me off on a Turkish architect, which I will show in the bonus section at the end of this video. Pretty spectacular architecture. Before I get into that, we've got work to do. Welcome back to this week's episode of Geomancy, where we typically look at the past to see ahead in the form of buildings and architecture. Last week, we took a look at the works of 6 architects plus the Tarsney Act, which led to the creation of many buildings throughout the United States, including some of these that you can see here. But the most interesting building from last week's video was definitely the Baltimore City Hall, which was said to have been designed by 21-year-old George Frederick just before the Civil War. And as this commenter said in a couple videos previously, the City Hall in Baltimore looks very similar to Philadelphia. I agree. It's that Second Empire style. I guess George Frederick studied hard. I contrasted his work with my architectural work when I was an apprentice in my early 20s, and all I did was a simple kitchen renovation, as you can see here, where this guy's using all the tools that were not available to any of the previous builders, and we get a nice end result. Who wouldn't be happy with this kitchen? But it pales in comparison to the works that I've shown you and some of the works that I will show you in today's American architectural history lesson. So we're jumping into this main building at University of Notre Dame, and really thank you for the comments, because I wouldn't have known much about this building if it weren't for the comment on that video last week. And upon reading this is the most bizarre story of any building that I've read so far anywhere in the world. And if you have anything that can top this, please leave it in the comments, because I would be happy to look into it. So the main administrative building at University of Notre Dame, 3 buildings were built at the site. The first was built in 1843, replaced with a larger one in 1865, which burned down in 1879. The third building, which is the current one, was created in 1879. So this is the history behind this building, right? They built the first building in August 1843, and it housed basically all of the university's administrative offices, dorms, classrooms, everything, the kitchen. It wasn't enough, so in 1864, they started the second building, which was basically a renovation and addition on top of the first one, or so they say. And it cost them a cool $35,500 to do, equivalent to $628,000 today. Well, in 2021, it's probably closer to $700,000 today. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This building, the second main building, suffered a fire in April of 1879. And this fire caused the building to burn to the ground, and there was no saving it. So this is the story, right? April 23rd, around 11 in the morning, smoke and flames could be seen rising from the roof. Within 3 hours, the fire consumed the building. What kind of fire was this? I mean, this is pretty intense fire. So 3 hours for the building to burn to the ground in April of 1879. Well, this is what happened. They didn't waste any time at all getting ready for the third and final building. This part of the story reads like some fantasy novel, okay? The university took action by selecting, out of 30 competitors, a new design by Willoughby J. Edbrook, who drew the new plans by May 10th. So remember, April 23rd, the building burnt. By May 10th, Willoughby J. Edbrook had new plans already drafted. Architect Edbrook, brother Charles Borromeo, Patrick Harding, CSC, and mathematics professor William Ivers marked off the dimensions of the construction on the day of the groundbreaking ceremony, May 17th, and the first stone for the foundation was laid on the 19th. So this sounds like a joke. An architect, a brother, and a math professor mark off dimensions for a building. Rail cars full of bricks arrived continuously to town and were brought to campus in a steady stream of wagons. By May 31st, 26 stonemasons and bricklayers were working with their support crews on the walls of the new building. The construction required about 300 veteran tradesmen, including 156 skilled stonemasons and bricklayers. This exceeded the number of experienced workers in the South Bend area and was also scarce in Chicago because of the rebuilding effort due to the Great Fire in October 1871. Hence, skilled workmen were brought into South Bend from great distances. The construction was very rapid due to the zeal of the workers and volunteers. By June 21st, the first story was completed, and by June 28th, they completed the second. The 4th of July saw the completion of the third. The building was completed before the fall semester of 1879. 56 bricklayers and 4.35 million bricks were necessary to complete it, and once finished, it stood 187 feet tall. The building also required 300 tons of cut limestone. The halls were wide and it was considered hygienic since they had installed a ventilating system unequaled in any public building in America at the time. The Golden Dome was the last thing to be finished, with the iron framework, the panels, and the columns supporting the dome being added during the summer of 1882, and the dome itself was finished in September. The statue of Mary atop the dome weighs 4,000 pounds and stands 19 feet tall. It was a gift from the sisters, students, and alumni of adjacent St. Mary's College, Notre Dame's sister school. It replicates the pose of the statue of Mary on the column of the Immaculate Conception in Piazza di Spagna in Rome, erected under Pius IX. It was designed by Chicago artist Giovanni Melli. The statue arrived on campus in July 1880 to replace the one that was destroyed in the fire. The cast iron statue sat on the rebuilt front porch of the new main building for 2 years while the new dome was completed. The $1 million rebuilding project had left the university in debt. University founder Reverend Edward Soren, CSC, wanted to gild the dome in real gold, but the Holy Cross Community's Council of Administration for Notre Dame deemed it too great an extravagance. The standoff lasted until 1886, when Father Soren used his position as Superior General of the community to name himself to the committee and ask to be its chairman. He then refused to come to the meeting so that the other members could not legally conduct its business, even moving to temporary quarters at St. Mary's and refusing to return. When university business halted, the committee relented and Father Soren got his golden dome and statue. The first project cost $2,000, while the 10th gilding of the dome in 2005 cost $300,000. Wow, that's the most unbelievable story of any building in American architectural history or global architectural history I've ever read. And if you, whatever you think of it, leave me a comment. I really want to know what people think. Do you believe this story? Do you believe the building was there? Do you believe there's some cover-up or something going on? I should also mention that Reverend Soren conveniently left for Europe 2 or 3 days before the previous building burned down. And once it had burnt, he came right back. Strange coincidence, if you believe in coincidences. But yeah, this is absolutely unbelievable. So here are some pictures of this main building of Notre Dame. Up in the top left, this is the second main building. So this is the one before the current one. And it wasn't too shabby itself, right? Not too shabby at all. Looks like a typical reset building in the first place. But this main building is absolutely stunning. And the fact that they were said to have done this, fueled by zeal, in 3 months. I don't like being lied to. I don't know about you, but I really don't like being lied to, especially to my face, and especially with a smile. So I feel like I'm being lied to about this building and its history. And thank you to that commenter for tipping me off, because it led to more discoveries. So we're going to dive into the architect behind this building, Willoughby J. Edbrook, and we're going to look at some of his buildings. Willoughby J. Edbrook, an American architect and bureaucrat who remained faithful to a Richardsonian Romanesque style in the era of Beaux-Arts architecture in the United States. He had a stint as the supervising architect of the Treasury Department, the same role that James Knox Taylor had. So Willoughby J. Edbrook, I mean, I don't know. He was a protege of Richardson and did a lot of work. So these are some of his works. The Georgia State Capitol, 1884 to 1889. The Old Post Office in Washington, D.C., 1892 to 1899. The Milwaukee Federal Building, 1892 to 1899. The Federal Courthouse and Post Office in St. Paul, Minnesota, 1894 to 1902. The San Jose Post Office, which is now part of the Museum of Art, in 1892. And this building actually looks very similar to what I showed in America is the Old World Part 2 in Cincinnati. There's a Cincinnati Museum of Art, which also has Richardsonian Romanesque style. I wonder if he was involved. There's also the Wheeler Opera House out in Aspen, Colorado, 1888 to 1889. So he was all over the place doing these types of buildings, or so we're told. I don't really know. And again, I'm not too concerned with the architects. I want to know who the builders were that were executing with such precision in these times. Next up is Philadelphia architect Irwin T. Catharine, who was chief architect of the Philadelphia Public Schools from 1920 until 1937. Many of his works are different styles, but he was notable for doing a lot of Gothic style high schools and middle schools or junior high schools in Philly. Now, the one thing that I don't understand is that he did so many buildings, or said to have, back at a time when the population was much lower than it is today, or so we're told. And many of these schools today are not used to capacity. They're vacant, they're closed down, or they're repurposed into other buildings, such as the case of Edward Bach Vocational School, which is now a massive compound of many different businesses. So let's look at some of these schools, and you can decide for yourself if you think they were appropriate for inner city middle and high schoolers. We've got the J. Cook School in Philadelphia, 1922 to 1924. Simon Gratz High School, 1925, looking similar to Overbrook High School, which was done the year before. Overbrook is where Will Smith went to high school in West Philadelphia. Edwin M. Stanton School, 1925 to 1926. Followed by the Lydia Dara School, 1926 to 1927. The Spring Garden School, they were getting this and the Laura H. Carnell School underway right at the beginning of the Great Depression. So it looks like they, did a good job when money was tight. Next up is a trio, McKim, Mead, and White. Now these dudes did many, many buildings all around the country, all over. Train stations, government buildings, museums, state capitals, you name it, libraries. So let's take a look at some of their buildings. And again, I think that these dudes were supreme reset renovators in charge of some major buildings. So these are some of their works. The original Madison Square Garden. Actually, this is the second Madison Square Garden. There were several iterations, 1, 2, and 3. This is the second. Done in 1890. And at the end of this video, I'll show some different pictures of it, but it was pretty magnificent for the time. If you've been to New York City, there's a chance that you've been to Washington Square and have seen this magnificent arch. They also did Liggett Hall on Governor's Island. I included this because Governor's Island is a star fort. You can check that out, and you can also see that in my list of star forts worldwide that I've linked on various videos, including this one. They also did the Low Memorial Library at Columbia from 1895 to 1897. Nice dome. That domes like that require just amazing precision and execution. Now, this prison ship martyrs monument in Brooklyn has an interesting story. I won't spend too much time on it. Very strange history. These monuments that have to deal with soldiers and sailors can be found all over the place. And they're usually phallic obelisk type columnal monuments, for what it's worth. They also did the Rhode Island State House, 1891 to 1901. So what would it be without a state house under, the architect's belt? They gotta do that. Next up, Daniel Burnham, Chicago architect. He most notably did the World's Columbia Exposition, among many other buildings in New York, Chicago, and different places, DC, and even the Philippines. So let's take a look at some of his buildings. Again, if he's part of a World's Fair, that means he's definitely a reset architect, and he had something to do with planning the new reality. The Rookery, Chicago, 1886. We've got the World's Columbia Exposition, also in Chicago, 1893, nicknamed the White City. And if you don't know anything about the World's Fairs, there are so many videos on hidden history and the World's Fairs. I would encourage you to just YouTube search those terms and you'll find something. But there were World's Fairs all over the place, and they were said to have been built using temporary structures. So afterwards, everything got demolished. But typically, they left 1 or 2 buildings in each city, and I've shown the building that they have remaining in Philadelphia in previous videos. Nonetheless, these World's Fairs are really mind-blowing, and I think they were the reset carnivals. They were indoctrinating the new inhabitants of the new world. Much can be said about them, and I will do more in the future. Next up are 3 railway stations named Union Station. Pennsylvania Union Station in Pittsburgh, Union Station in El Paso, and Union Station in Washington, D.C. All 3 built in the early 1900s. I've already talked about railways and what they can lead to, but this is definitely something to add into that bag of interesting connections. I wonder why they're all named Union. The Union Pacific Railway. There's a lot of different things, but really, why are they called Union? And what do they have to do with anything deeper beneath the surface? A little bit out of left field is the Negros Occidental Provincial Capital in Bacolod, Philippines, done in 1927 and 1933. So again, it seems like in the world of architecture, there's no Great Depression. They had money and funds to be gone all over the world and doing things like that. Now, I did have to do a little bit of research and take a second glance when I read the name of that building, because up on the entablature it says Provincial Capital of Occidental Negroes, and I thought, what? But yeah, Occidental Negros, it's a region in the Philippines. Still an interesting name and worth digging into down the line. The last architect that we're gonna look at in today's video is Frederick Law Olmsted. Now, this man was involved in many projects that I've already mentioned, including University of Notre Dame. But he is the father of American landscape architecture, or so we're told. And his first major project was Central Park in New York City. Again, if you've been to New York City, there's a chance you've been to Central Park. Now, the craziest thing about this story is, just like the Notre Dame building, which was won in a contest, he and another architect named Calvert-Vaux won a contest to design the Central Park in what was called the Greenwood Plan. And this was his first landscape architecture project ever. At the age of 30, he designed what we now know as Central Park. Do you believe that? I don't know. What is it with these one-hit wonders that, in their first time at bat, they smash it literally out of the park? So let's look at some of his works. He was also involved in some other things that we've looked at. So, the Central Park plan, there you can see. He designed it along with Vaux in 1852, and then they won that competition. A couple years later, 1857, they began construction, and it lasted until 1873. I mean, it's mind-blowing stuff, to be honest. Next, the U.S. Capitol grounds in Washington, D.C., 1874 to 1892. So hot off the press, he was done with Central Park. He said, what could I do next? What's bigger? And helped design and landscape the grounds of the Capitol. The Biltmore Estate grounds in Asheville, North Carolina, which is the primary residence of the Vanderbilt family. Now, Olmsted was also involved with doing many of the robber baron, reset baron estates and mansions. I think, again, he was tapped to be the role that he is. Remember in the last video in part 1 of the prolific architects, I talked about Henry Hobson Richardson, who designed the New York State Hospital for the Insane. Well, he partnered with Olmsted on this, and it is also known as the Richardson-Olmsted complex. Again, why are they designing, tag teaming to design grounds for the insane? Do the insane really need grounds that are well landscaped? I mean, they absolutely do, no doubt. But were these grounds what they said they were? I don't think so. I think they turned them into something for the insane. And then you can see he also did the Notre Dame University grounds. I couldn't find an exact date on this, but I'll just put it around the time of the third main building being built. And as you can see in this picture, we have some ground level windows. So I wonder what that tells us about Notre Dame and South Bend, Indiana. Speaking of that, we're going to just look at some of these buildings in larger format, and, I'll let you and your eyes do the thinking. Alright, well that almost does it for this week's video, but we do have a bonus. Thank you for this commenter for recommending that I look into the architect Mimar Sinan, who I had never heard of, honestly. There's so much architecture and so many architects that I've never heard of and may never hear of if it's not for somebody putting it in my direction. So, let's take a quick look at some of the works of Mimar Sinan. And I'll be honest, this architect's works make everything that I showed you in this video look like middle school work, to be honest. This is what we have. Mimar Sinan was the chief Ottoman architect and civil engineer for several sultans, Suleiman the Magnificent, Selim II, and Murad III. He was responsible for the construction of more than 300 major structures, such as the Selimiye Mosque, the Kanuni Sultan Suleiman Bridge, and many others. The son of a stonemason, he received a technical education and became a military engineer. He rose rapidly through the ranks to become first an officer and finally a janissary commander, with the honorific title of Sinan. He refined his architectural and engineering skills while on campaign with the janissaries, becoming expert at constructing fortifications of all kinds, as well as military infrastructure projects such as roads, bridges, and aqueducts. At about the age of 50, he was appointed as chief royal architect, applying the technical skills he had acquired in the army to the creation of fine religious buildings and civic structures of all kinds. He remained in this post for almost 50 years. Yeah, so this dude almost lived to be 100, even though we can't seem to nail down exactly when he was born. I wonder if he, was as prolific as the story goes. But either way, feast your eyes on some of the beauties that he was said to have designed. Here is the Selimiye Mosque. My Turkish is not 100, so I don't know if I'm butchering that. But this was done in a 7-year period from 1568 to 1575. Seems like hundreds of years ago, even though they were a little bit further beyond the timeline, or maybe they were further ahead. They could still get these things done in a few years. Truly spectacular architecture. And I'll be honest, from what I know about buildings and form, I don't think these are merely religious structures. Just as I've been saying, cathedrals are not just religious structures, they're power structures. It looks like power. It's saying power. So is this, the Sezadi Mosque in Istanbul. These structures are not saying, just God or Allah. It's saying power, energy, technology. It's high level architecture. It's something beyond what we've been told, I can tell you that. Repurposed for something else, just as it always is. The Haseki Sultan Complex. Now, there are many structures in this complex done between 1538 and 1551. So again, massive stonework, amazing masonry, truly top class. This architect and his work are amazing, but as always, I wonder if his works were the renovation projects of something left from a previous civilization. I don't know, because as you may know, there are many cycles of resets. And the buildings that we're seeing in the United States are at a different reset cycle than maybe some of these that we see in Turkey, such as the Mimar Sultan Mosque, also in Istanbul from 1563 to 1570. And if you look in the background, you'll see other mosques, possibly designed by him. So I think these buildings have to do with Earth's energetic grid system, just as the cathedrals do, just as these government buildings do, just as your home does. Everything does. It's a part of this chip system that we are living on and in. And we also have control and power over it. And by understanding it and gaining a little bit more insight into the stories, whether true or not, it starts to open us up into what could be. That's all I have for you this week. Thank you for watching as always. I really appreciate the comments. Keep commenting because I'm getting a lot from the comments. As you can tell, I interact with you, I engage, and I appreciate everything that we're doing. Take care, stay blessed.